Happy Wednesday to everybody out there. I am Sam, and with me as always, we've got Zebulon Dak and Ross and our special guest, Matty F. Brown. Welcome, everybody.
What up?
Hey.
It's Thursday for two of us.
Yeah, for the two of you.
You no longer have the majority.
May the fourth be with you.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, it's Wednesday. Last time we spoke, there was a draft, and now that draft is done. And
it's finished. It's in the books.
We got ourselves a Hall of Fame boxer.
We really did.
Yeah, it's interesting draft, I would say. We'll talk a lot about it, but first question, and a lot of it has to do is like we all predicted that the Seahawks 100% would want to trade down. I don't think any of us could ever envision that it would happen as many times as it did, and then after that frenzy of 3 trades in a row, there were no further trades. Like, they had all this ammo, they had all these picks on the second day, and they didn't move up at all. Like, I thought that was pretty crazy. I definitely was surprised at how they started this draft.
It was a crazy time. I mean, you knew they wanted to trade.
Yeah, you definitely knew they wanted to trade, but I think, I don't think anyone could anticipate that they would have traded 3 times, right?
Well, they want to trade once, and 2 is kind of 3 just like that. I mean, it worked out. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was.
There's no mock drafts out there.
If there was someone that could mock draft 3 trades in a row, a team picking up 4 additional picks to go from 7 to 11, they would be beyond a guru. Matty had them for 4 trades, so he was off by 1, but it's pretty close, wouldn't you say, Matty?
Yeah, I think they just clearly loved the third area of the third round, and Schneider said that they considered trading up potentially. I think there was a guy the Raiders took, which could have been Melifonry perhaps, because he almost fell to us. Yeah, I really did expect them to trade up with some of that draft capital, but with all the players they've drafted, the competition across the board is very deep, you'd think.
Yeah, I don't think it's, obviously it's impossible to predict specifics when you're talking about, 3 or 4 separate trades. But turning that 1 pick into 4 and overall turning the 7 into 11 picks and getting 4 of them in the third round, like, that's pretty job well done, gentlemen.
Assuming the picks work out.
Well, I mean, even if the picks don't work out, like, that's always the aftermath, like the glow, the craziness of a draft. It's always like, oh, these guys look great on paper, and there's always like, well, how will they actually be in the NFL? We know that 75% of the draft is going to pan out in less than 3 years. So, in baseball, that'd be pretty respectable, and they're not getting monster contracts anymore. But we've seen a lot of huge successes. We've also seen really, really terrible drafts by the Seahawks on the flip side as well. But I think my gut reaction to this draft, we'll talk about the day 1 trade, but my gut reaction after the draft was completed is I was beyond ecstatic. We'll talk more about that once we get into the topic number 1. But Matty, what was your gut reaction after all the drafts were picked? Like, what was your reaction to how the Seahawks had done?
Yeah, I was delighted. I think they addressed all of the needs really, other than cornerback, where there's a potential question mark, though they're trying this new convert thing. But overall, I was very happy. I thought, our roster doesn't have that many holes on it, so in a way they can go best available. And there was no real pick that stood out to me as a pick where I was like, oh, that's very disappointing, other than perhaps Justin Senior, who's drafted in the 6th round, so that's just a flyer anyway.
Right.
Zeb, what was your gut reaction after this draft? You watched the second day with a bunch of people, a bunch of Seahawks fans. I'm sure it was kind of crazy to be in an atmosphere where you're surrounded by people that are fans of the team, because he probably got a huge varying reaction. Some people were super excited. Some people will be like, I don't know who this guy is. It's the end of the world.
I mean, the group I was with in particular was pretty level-headed. There wasn't a lot of emotions going when it comes to the picks. But yeah, I don't know. On paper, obviously, it looks like we got some real potential key guys that can come in and play. I mean, maybe not start, but compete. And just all in all together, on paper, it looks great, but it always looks great. So you got to, we'll wait and see what these guys are like on the field, I guess.
Ross, what about you? What was your gut reaction? Because one thing that we talked about last week was, we all watch this in different ways. So I'm really interested to see how it was for you, because you, along with Matty, are in different time zones. So that helps that changes how you probably react when they are active and inactive at times, I bet.
I mean, it's a mid-morning thing. First round. I mean, first round, we're like, what? Okay, I sat around for pick. It was okay though. I mean, wanted him to did, and so I didn't feel bad. But it's a bit of a weird experience to really sit down for 3.5 hours. But it was entertaining watching the other team. And then when it got to the overall kind of, it was more educational than anything else. A lot of the players, some of the most, what are they doing that? Like, center's like the only semi-solid position we had on the line. Center, but then you research, you're like, oh, well, that guy's Army knife of offensive lineman. Cool. Keel Griffin, I'm like, man, if we had stayed put in second, we could have king, but I don't think they really value corner.
Yeah.
So
No,
I understood it. And I really, once the draft is done, then I get to read up on everybody, and I can go, oh, hey, I thought.
Yeah, I think this was a great exercise in kind of what we talked about last week, where I don't know a lot of guys in college, so it's hard for me to know who should I pay attention to, because all the people that the Seahawks had targeted, they all had shots to take them. The only guys that I saw that they were rumored to be interested was Garrett Bowles, and he got taken by Denver with the 20th pick. But every other guy, they were there at 26, they were there at 31, they were there at 34, they were there at 35. And the only one that they really missed out on was Kevin King, because he got taken with the 33rd pick, but Seattle could have taken him at 26. They could have taken him at 31. So part of me wants to think that the Seahawks definitely had a plan going in mind into this draft, saying, like, we need these particular guys. We are going to continue the trend of not drafting a corner in the first or second round. They didn't pick up a corner until Keel Griffin with the 90th pick in the draft, which was a third-round pick, 26th pick in the third round. So it's something I think that for people that are really versed in the Seahawks, they maybe not they're not surprised. But I definitely think that there were probably a lot of people that were super frustrated on day one, because it's not fun to spend an entire day and not see them make a move. I definitely saw that on Twitter. Zeb, Matty, Ross, were you guys online? Were you guys watching the draft on TV, through feeds, and also on social media as well?
I was watching with my Saints supporting friend, who was very disappointed when we traded out the pick for Reuben Foster to be selected, because that's who they were hanging on for. But initially, when we drafted McDowell, I was a bit annoyed, because I thought, oh well, that he's the antithesis of our entire philosophy. But then you hear that they've worked him out 4 times privately. you hear Schneider on the phone saying, "Remember our conversation," and Pete Carroll saying, "Come in and work hard." And then you look at what he can do with his, great burst, pass rushing from the 3-tech position, could probably play all across the line when he develops more moves and a better plan of action at the point of attack. And you feel a lot happier about it on reflection. But at first I had a bit of an overreaction.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody can get frustrated at it anymore. Like, we all know this is what's going to happen, right? We're going to trade out, likely of the first round, and pick up some extra picks in the mid and later rounds. Like, the people that are like emotionally reacting to that happening, it's like you have to have seen that coming, right?
Yeah, you've seen a John Schneider draft before.
Right.
But it's true, but you kind of have all this time, and all you have to look at draft stuff, and I didn't look at it until really the last couple of weeks before the draft, especially the last few days. Started reading a lot, and then I, by that time, had fallen in love with King.
Yeah.
Perfect. He's 6'3", German, and he's skilled and story because he's the UW guy. So, still, I probably not that position, but it's still like you kind of fall in love with
I think you fall in love, but what I noticed, and I watched the draft on my computer because I was doing a new thing where I was doing everything on social media at the same time for the site, for the stuff that we're doing with the podcast and everything else. So it was actually a really, really fun exercise because, guys like Matty were online and you were chatting and we were able to talk about stuff in real time. So it was a really, really fun thing to do. Maybe not like the most like outwardly social thing I've ever done, but still, it was a lot of fun. But the one thing that you notice, and this speaks really to what you were talking about, Ross, is there are guys that in the draft you fall in love. For whatever reason, it's Todd McShay, Mel Kiper's number one, best player available. And you see the Seahawks sitting there at 20, 21, 22, 23, and then, the draft is getting closer and closer to their pick. And then all of a sudden, he's there, and then the Seahawks make a move, and like, oh, well, if that guy that I fell in love with is taken, then this is a terrible draft. And that, I think, happens really commonly, and you saw that a lot. I saw that a lot with Twitter, like, the people that I was following, the people that were tweeting and retweeting and messaging and responding to other people, there was a lot of frustration when Kevin King went, when Budda Baker went, when Sidney Jones went. Those are the three defensive backs,
local boys,
from UW that a lot of people had grown accustomed to. And that was like, for some people, they're like, this is terrible. Can't we pass on all of them? I think there is definitely one of those things like you fell in love with someone, and now that you can't get them, there's always going to be a little bit of that remorse. But let's move forward. Let's talk about topic number 1 here. So topic number 1, this is basically our draft. For those of you that are watching live, you can actually see that we had all these trades, and you can see all of our draft picks. I don't want to go down and talk about everyone, but the thing I want to highlight is I've never seen a team trade down going from 26 down to 35 and pick up 4 picks. We had talked about last week that there was this rumor about Atlanta wanting to trade their 31st pick with Seattle and try and trade a 4th round for it. And we all thought it was kind of crazy. Like, why would you talk about a trade before the draft? Like,
yeah, I got pretty specific on that one. That's never happening.
Yeah, and like if you're a Seahawks fan, you're thinking like, oh, I kind of feel like we could get a little bit more than that. And lo and behold, Seahawks are sitting there at 26. The clock is winding down and down and down, and all of a sudden, Seahawks make a trade. Atlanta's 31st pick, 95th pick, 249th pick for Seattle's 26th pick. And the fact that they were still in the first round, the fact that they got 2 additional picks and they only moved down 5 spots, I was beyond ecstatic. But I did not expect them to trade again with San Francisco for the 34th pick, the second pick in the second round, and then also pick up another 4th round pick, which they didn't have at the time. So it was a really interesting draft, but I want to get some comments from you guys. if you could, Matty, we'll start with you. If you could give me one thought about those trades in particular, any one of them, especially trading with the division rival, and then someone that they drafted from the 2nd to the 7th round. Give me feedback on something that you saw, whether when they made the selection or now that you've done a little bit more research.
Well, firstly, I'm very glad that they clearly leaked the pick rumor. I mean, when something gets out of the Seattle front office, it happens for a reason. Like they usually keep it a tight ship, and clearly the leaking worked because they managed to trade down that many times. And I'm not bothered about trading with a division rival because, I mean, if it was a player that we'd wanted, as Schneider said, then that's a bit different. But we had no real place for Reuben Foster, and we picked up another pick. And then in terms of the draft and the picks which interest me, I really was ecstatic with Delano Hill and pretty much all of our safety picks. So I think Hill's just a really solid tackler, and he attacks the run downhill really aggressively. And his straight line speed, he ran a 4.4740, and that shows up on tape as well. And then in coverage, you can have him. He lined up outside against wide receivers. He lined up in the slot. He lined up in the box. He lined up in single high. Played all over the field. And I really think he could play potentially that big nickel that we've talked about. I mean, he's 216 pounds, so he can set the edge against the run too. Or he could be a very stout backup strong safety to Cam Chancellor and McDougald. And I just think the competition that brings is excellent. And then as a whole, I've recently submitted an article Inside the Pylon about why Seattle took 3 safeties, because I saw a lot of people getting perhaps a bit frustrated about that. Well, Tyson's going to be an outside cornerback, and on tape, it really does show why they thought he had the traits to make that move. He plays the look-in technique from the slot really well, where the Seahawks have their back to the sideline and then they shuffle and bail sort of sideways, and they're looking in on the quarterback as they cover their man downfield. And he was excellent in doing that while staying on top of his receiver. So I think that's an excellent pick. And then Thompson, I think, Tedrick Thompson, who he was the 4th round pick that we gained from trading down. And I think Hill was an extra 3rd round pick we picked up. But anyway, Thompson, I think, really upgrades the range that Terrell just doesn't have, and the instincts. Like, don't be fooled by his 4.6 40-yard dash. Thompson, he plays quick on tape because of his instincts, and then his ball skills are excellent. He had 7 interceptions and 9 passes deflected, and that 9 passes deflected was the most in college football last season. So I'm really happy with the 3 safety picks.
So, surprise, surprise, the guy that studies DBs loves all the DB picks.
Yeah.
But no, I think that's a great point you bring up. Keel Griffin and Tedrick Thompson both were 1 and 4 in interceptions and pass deflections in college football last year. To me, that's super impressive because we talked about it last week. College football is basketball on grass. I mean, defense is just not touted in the same way. And they got guys that, like, they fit that Seahawks line corner mold. What they want guys that are long, lean, and in all the small footage I saw of these guys, they all put their head on a swivel. They all are trying to track the ball, which a lot of poor defenders, they're going to watch the receiver. They don't have the ball skills to turn their head. So I saw that as really positive stuff. Zeb, what about you? What was your take about any of these trades, and is there one guy in particular that you're really excited about that they drafted?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know these guys nearly as in depth as Matty does, but my one experience that I guess I'll talk about is that I didn't even realize we traded with the Jaguars. We traded back with the Falcons and then the Niners, and then the trade with the Jaguars happened. I didn't even notice it. And then we ended up, I believe, with that pick, that 6th round pick, getting Mike Tyson, who everybody knows as one of the greatest heavyweight boxers in history. So I'm glad we were able to make that trade and make that pick happen.
So the
Yeah,
funny...
like if Mike Tyson can,
Oh, go ahead, Russ. Sorry.
but Ali would.
Russ?
Sorry, what?
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think.
Yeah.
The trades again. I mean, yeah, some people were bothered. First of all, if you really, really believe doing, because the idea is you can come up with a trade, right? It's supposed to help both teams. If it helps you equally or more than them, then you still want to make that trade. And if you're making a trade that they came out ahead, why are you making the whole idea you can't, unless it's kind of a thing like you think a player would just help them if it's for a player and you think the player would help. I think draft day, I think on a normal about it, draft day, I don't feeding frenzy of players out there, and you got to get what you need to get. Again, Ethan as the center was. We need offensive line, but that's okay at. But again, plug and play at almost play. He's got the body for attack. Although the fact that they didn't play him attack a little bit. If even in college, he wasn't.
Russ, your audio is cutting in and out here, so sorry about
Really?
that. But yeah, I agree with your point. Evan Posick is a very interesting pick. Now, the one thing that I saw throughout all the stuff that I was reading up is he was a guy that was targeted at the end of the second round. He was taken with the 58th pick overall, which is, Seahawks' natural second round pick. But it's one of those things, and I think that's kind of what's difficult for people to understand is certain picks are not sexy. Drafting linemen in a second, third, whatever round, it's not a sexy thing to do. And to some degree, Seahawks, because they drafted a lot of depth, they drafted a lot of guys that can be plugged in years 2, 3, 4 and be starters in 2, 3, and 4. Makes so it's not really that sexy of a pick. You look at a team like the Browns. The Browns had what a lot of people will say is like an amazing draft because they kept piling up first round picks for the future, and they still were in the first round. Was it 3 times? They drafted 3 first round picks, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot of talent to secure in one round. Luckily this is not the old CBA where those are like guaranteed like $25 million a year contracts that are given in the first round. But, they're making quote-unquote sexy picks because they have so many glaring holes. When Seattle made all these trades, the first time they traded back, no shock at all. When they made that second trade to San Francisco, I was shocked. I thought that there would have been someone that they would have liked to have picked. But in those 2 trades, they picked up 3 additional picks, and I can't fault them for doing that because that is a very John Schneider kind of thing. What really surprised me was that the Jaguars, kind of like what Zeb was saying, is like that the Jaguars wanted to make a play and move up just 1 spot. We saw that with Chicago. I think that was the surprise of the draft when Chicago moved all of those picks to get the number 2 spot to pick a quarterback. I was shocked. I can't imagine that they loved him that much that they couldn't wait unless they felt that another team was going to take him, and San Francisco really maybe San Francisco was going to take them. Of the draft picks that were taken, that I am most excited about, I think is Malik McDowell. This is a guy that people said had top 10 potential. They said that when he played on this Michigan State that had a horrible year, they said that he was a hot and cold player. And I saw some tape. Some people online, Coleman Crawford, shout out to the 3-Step Drop. He did a couple of videos. He shared a couple of them online, and he showed how good of a player Malcolm Malik McDowell could be. And that got me excited because the biggest thing that I wanted the Seahawks to address, which they weren't able to get in free agency, was some kind of interior pass rush, some kind of interior penetration. Now, Michael Bennett often lined up inside, and he did a pretty good job, but I don't think it was enough with what the Seahawks needed, because too many times, I remember last year, they would get beat deep, and on 3rd and longs, if the quarterback could step up, they would have time. Doesn't matter how much edge pressure they got. I'm excited because I think Malik McDowell can be that guy. He's super young. He's super raw. He doesn't have a lot of moves. I looked at the video that someone posted, and it's pretty much a swim move where he hopes that the guard or the center or the tackle engages, and like he just swipes their hand and just speeds by him. That reminds me a lot of Bruce Irvin, and Bruce Irvin was a very, very physical freak with a ton of speed. You know, he's doing this from the inside, and I'm really excited with what he could do. So I'm excited for this draft. I think all the guys that you guys pointed out, whether it's Posick, Delano Hill, all of these guys, they're all bring something that the Seahawks don't have, or they're helping to make stronger. Final thoughts, guys, before we move on.
Just on McDowell, do you think that potentially he is an eventual Bennett replacement, considering he lined up all across the line, not just of 3 tech, like they put him at nose, they put him at 3 tech, they put him at 5 tech, they put him at 7 tech, they put him at wide 9. Do you think eventually that he could develop into that sort of Bennett mold of pass rusher where he can play it inside out?
Yeah, I think that's something that this draft, like, if you look at all the guys that they picked, they're all very versatile players. They've all played up and down their position. No one ever played at one position their entire time. They've already told a lot of the safeties that, hey, we're going to try you out at corner. We're going to try you out at this big nickel position where you're going to be playing, deep, you're going to play being mid, and you're going to be playing press. That, to me, shows that, like, hey, this is the depth draft, but they got a lot of these guys that are just, like, perfect molds of what they're looking for. But to your point, Matty, yeah, I think there is a great potential that this is kind of a Michael Bennett replacement, just like Posick is a potential Justin Britt replacement if Justin Britt is not able to be secured. You look at
Delano Hill could be a Chancellor replacement. There's a lot of hedges.
Yeah, and I think that was the smart thing to do in this draft, particularly because it was such a strong DB draft. This seems like the perfect year to really get that depth. And you look at someone like Keel Griffin. He looks long, lean, and rangy. We see that with Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman probably can't be drafted in the 5th round because he's built this archetyped corner style, and other teams are going to see that and say, hey, this guy looks like a Richard Sherman, let's go after him. That's why I think the Seahawks drafted Keel Griffin in the 3rd. So I think you bring up a great point, and my answer to a lot of it is, like, it's all about drafting for versatility and for the future, because Ross, you talked about this last week. This is not a young team. It's not a young defense. It's a veteran team. They're not the oldest team, but they're definitely in the middle of the pack, and they have to start planning for that.
Stars, a lot of the stars are. I mean, you're not play high level.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to topic number 2 here. Unless final thoughts, anyone?
Just on Griffin, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone rooting for Kevin King, and I was hoping that we might somehow get him, but his big weakness was bump and run coverage, and Griffin, I'd say his strength is the bump and run coverage, which of course Seattle likes to run. He's got a really disruptive punch at the line of scrimmage, and I think that's something that I haven't seen talked about much.
Yeah, I think, and what's interesting is Keel Griffin and Amara Dober, they actually played against each other this year, and a lot of people point out that Garbo got the best of Griffin in that game. I think it's a little unfair. You're talking about UCF versus Michigan. Michigan really should be able to come out ahead most times than not, but I agree with that assessment that his mold of being that press kind of guy, that seems like it adds more value to what the Seahawks want than what maybe Kevin King could offer, which I'm sure not everyone was happy to hear. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on to topic 2. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but what I really wanted to get into is what can change in the course of a day. So topic number 2, Seahawks trade down twice on day 1, then trade again on day 2. What was your reaction at the end of day 1 versus the end of day 2? And really what I want to ask here about is, we expected a trade to be made. I don't know if any of us expected what actually would end up happening, but they took 6 guys that, across the board, they got pretty good reviews. Now, a lot of the gurus, and we talked about this last week, they gave them, middling grades. They're like, oh, well, we don't know how this guy's going to fit. We don't know where this guy's going to play. That seems to be what Seahawks were really looking for. Matty, where was your take? Because you had guys that you thought that they would target at day 1. They end up trading back. But after getting 6 guys in day 2, which tied an NFL record for most players taken in the second and third round, did you change your perspective, or did you kind of say, like, okay, I see what's going on here?
I was ecstatic that they managed to trade down, as I've said, and I think that was the right thing to do in the draft. I mean, Schneider said that when the first time they traded down, the 5 guys that they'd be interested in drafting, they were all still there, and then so they traded down again, and apparently, according to Clayton as well, they wanted McDowell all along, so it worked out perfectly. And in regards, if I've changed the way I view Seattle's picks or how their draft approach, I was a bit surprised, as I've said, that they didn't decide to trade up at some point. But I think the closest they got was with Pocic, who they said, Schneider said he was sweating it out, waiting for that because they really wanted him, but they decided just to wait it out. And I think the fact that they have waited it out means that they've got so much competition, so many draft picks in areas. I mean, obviously they're not all going to hit, but pushing perhaps starters who've become maybe a bit too comfortable. Or
I think that's something that we talked a little bit about last week, where the competition. You can't give Jermaine Ifedi the right tackle position just freely. He has to work for it. He has to fight for it. And drafting a Evan Posick who could play potentially right tackle, and then you push Ifedi back into right guard, that seems like it's this idea that you're going to make the team a little bit better and better and better. Zeb, you were at a party. You were watching with a ton of Seahawk fans. You said that the mood was pretty solid. You didn't go to a party on day 1, but what do you think you were feeling at the end of that day? I don't know if you stayed to the end, and to the end of round 3, but what was your take? What was the crowd that you were with? What was their take at the end of day 2 after they completed the second and third round?
Well, day 1, I did actually watch at a bar with some people. Just a couple, just a small group. Smoke, one of my best friends, was there. And yeah, at the end of day 1, it's just like always. You kind of wish you would have came away with a guy just to have a guy, but at the same time, what we did was picking up extra picks in the next few rounds, and just an overall good feeling, but at least, still waiting to find out what's going to happen. At the end of day 2, I was thoroughly satisfied. Those 6 guys that we got in that one day almost felt like a full draft to me. I definitely left day 2 feeling satisfied with everything that we'd done, and impressed by what they were able to turn that one first-round pick into. So watching all that unfold with some other good Seahawks fans was definitely satisfying.
What do you think? What was the crowd's reaction? You watched at a bar with a bunch of other Seahawks fans. What do you think their take was once day 2 ended?
I mean, people weren't like jumping up and down and cheering or anything like that, but I think people, for the most part, feel like we addressed some important positions and got some decent prospects. There's always the one guy who's disappointed in something or other. Obviously, a lot of people still don't feel like we addressed the offensive line enough, and it kind of feels like every year that's kind of the feeling that we need to do something about the O-line, and we kind of don't do that much about it. But yeah, I think for the most part, everybody kind of felt encouraged by what we were able to do.
Did you have anyone yell out, "Who is this guy?" once they picked him?
Well, I did every time because I don't know who any of these guys are, but a couple of the guys that I was there with seemed to know what was good, had a little better idea about who these guys were and what we were getting ourselves into, better than me at least.
Nice. All right, Ross. No breathing. Hit me. What was your take at the end of day 2 of the draft?
The end of the day 2. To be honest, I was have it start at 8:00. I actually tried to set time like I was 10 and whatever, and it didn't really work out. So I actually felt lazy. I got up at noon and went over the summary, and Zeb said it felt like almost like there are teams who've had only we're kind of set. And really weird reaction. Kind of saw the position. Started looking for the guy that side of the ball. Seems almost like a tradition. Every year there's like the guy on defense, the offense. Trying to find like Aaron Jones was like. So that was like my only. Who's the guy that's going to be the project? But they're all flexible. But so I was again. I really have a.
Hey, Ross. Sorry, Ross, you're cutting out. So, you were talking about the flexibility, which is that something that you saw once you studied everything and you saw that, like, okay, I have a little bit more information about these guys. I know who they are. I can kind of see, like, oh, this guy can fit into multiple spots. Is that what you're saying, versatility-wise? Ross, did we lose you? Or we're not getting out of you. Sorry. All right. So, sorry, we're going to move a little bit further ahead. I want to echo basically what Matty and what Zeb said. Is they essentially got like a full draft in day 2, and it's kind of crazy to think that they had 6 picks in the first 106 picks. That's beyond crazy to me. Then you add in the fact that they got an early 4th round pick. They had 7 picks in the first 111 picks in this draft. That's just beyond crazy to me. So I think that when we ended day 1, it was kind of like, oh, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And it was more shame on me because it would have been it's pretty obvious that's what was going on. But at the end of day 2, I kind of feel like they got an interior pass rusher. They got depth at corner. They got a guy that's going to challenge for playing time right away on the offensive line. I couldn't be more happy for that. Darbo's like the one guy that I'm maybe not so sure about. He's the one guy that I wasn't as high on as the other guys, just because wide receiver is always something that the Seahawks could use. Maybe he's a good Jermaine Kearse replacement for the future. But I haven't seen enough of him to really understand what his skill sets are. I've seen some NFL comps that have been put out, and there was no one that like jumps out of the page. He's a 3rd round pick, even though it's at the end of the 3rd round. He's compensatory, I believe. So it's not like this is a guy that's gonna be a starter, but he's someone that should be targeted to kind of play for a while. Matty, I don't know if you know more about Darbo, but that was the one guy that I really didn't have quite a lot of information on. I'm not quite sure how I feel about him yet.
He ran a lot of different routes in college, which is becoming rarer and rarer, as we've discussed, basketball on grass. He can block really well, very willing, though he can work on it like any receiver. He can go up and get the football, wins those 50-50 balls, and he has sneaky long speed, I'd say. But I mean, he burnt Griffin, as we've touched on. I think also it means that the wide receiver 5 spot, there's some fierce competition there, because you'd think Darboe would be given slight preference as a third-round pick, even on the Seahawks, who have their always compete mantra. But, so you've got Darboe, then you've got Tanner McAvoy, and then Kenny Lawler, and a lot of David Moore, who they signed in. They drafted in the 6th round, wasn't it?
Yeah, in the 6th.
They've got a lot of guys vying for that final spot, unless they carry 6 wide receivers. But I don't really think the Seahawks will do that. Maybe McAvoy sneaks on for special teams and versatility.
I think there is something attractive about that. The fact that we're bringing a little bit more competition in, and these guys potentially can learn a little bit more rather than being kind of like forced into a starting role right away due to, hopefully, not due to injury, but, along that lines. So I think there are a lot of positives about this, and I think day 2, I was filled with nothing but positives. So thanks for giving me a little bit more information about Darboe there.
Darboe really looks the part to me. Not that ever means anything, but I'm definitely a wide receiver guy. That's always been sort of my favorite position and the guys I like to watch the most. And I'm excited about him. I like he's got a really cool story coming from Sierra Leone and some of the adversity he's had to deal with. And I'm sure just being drafted probably to him is an amazing feeling. And I expect him to come in and do whatever he has to do to be part of this team. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him play. Yeah,
which is funny because I talked about last week how I love wide receivers when we get drafted, and this is like the one time I don't know anything about the wide receivers, but, go figure.
I think you should be more excited about him. I'm going
to have to look for more video. I think really what it is I was so excited about Malik McDowell. Like, I watched someone break down a video of Malik McDowell versus Ryan Ramczyk, the guy that the Saints picked up.
Oh, that's great. That's a great video. Yeah.
And then they showed Solomon Thomas versus UW, University of Washington. And the guy watching Solomon Thomas, who was taken 3rd overall by the Niners, he was more enamored and excited by, like, man, who's the right guard and who's the right tackle for Washington? He's just like, they're stonewalling Thomas. Like, Thomas didn't do anything. And Stanford got blown out in that game. And then they showed the Malik McDowell versus Wisconsin. And Malik McDowell, this was early in the year. This is before Michigan State ended up being as terrible as it was. And he was wrecking people. He was taking on double teams. He was going inside, outside. It was, for me, kind of like, hey, this is something that I feel that we need. Not that we don't have enough pass rush, but he's doing it from the interior. And I felt like, man, this could be something huge. That's why I watched a lot more tape of him. But I will go back and I will watch Darboe. I know Coleman likes Darboe a lot. I tweeted him online about Darboe. So
one knock I'd have is when the ball's thrown sort of at his chest, he doesn't extend his hands fully. He's a bit of a body catcher in that sense. But then you see him go up and get the ball. That he had an amazing one-handed grab where he really went up and got it, and that's quite exciting, especially as a Curse upgrade, which I think he can be. I think that's probably what he's been drafted to become. Maybe not in his first year, but Curse I can see being cut next year for cap savings, and also his performance on the field last year wasn't really good enough, was it?
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's move on. We're going to go on to topic number 3. So this is the Homer Corner, and we want to talk about the one that got away. Who is your biggest Seahawks pick that they could make but didn't? So this is not about saying, like, oh, I wish they drafted Andrew Luck when Seahawks had no shot for him. So I'll start just to give you guys a little bit of an idea. So this is more of a retrospective because I wasn't super into the Seahawks in the draft and not for the, really for the past few years. But once I got more and more into the draft, I always go back and like, oh, how did this draft happen? How did this go? And the draft that I look back at, and it's something that's always stuck out to me, is the Randy Moss draft. So Randy Moss was selected by Minnesota. He fell a lot. He was crying in the green room. And one of my good friends had talked to me and told me about how the Seahawks had multiple chances to get him, and they passed on him. And it was Mike Holmgren, so he's not really going to take a big chance on a very questionable character guy. That's the one person I think of, and obviously it's super easy to pick out a guy who has had a Hall of Fame career, kind of thinking like, oh man, what if we had picked that kind of guy? But we probably didn't have the right offense for him. But that's the one guy that I can think of that I feel like, oh man, the Seahawks really let that guy get away. I don't know if you guys have one. Matty, what about you? Do you have something like that?
Maybe when we picked Paul Richardson in 2014. I mean, injuries have limited his potential, but we could have had Devontae Adams, perhaps, and maybe people would prefer that. Or Allen Robinson we could have had, or Jarvis Landry. So,
was that the draft where there was like a dozen great wide receivers?
Yeah, and we sort of ended up with the, good one, but not sort of a lesser one than what was around us.
So he really came alive at the end of the last season and showed what he.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Probably could be.
Like that's probably a bit harsh on him. But,
well, I don't think it's too harsh
the
because
offense those other wide receivers are in. They've given their receivers better opportunities, and they've thrown the ball a bit more. So.
Yeah, but you got to be healthy. I mean, if you can't get the field, it doesn't really matter where you were drafted or what roster space you're taking up.
Yeah.
So, I think that's totally fair. Zeb, what about you?
I don't have any off the top of my head from past drafts. I mean, obviously you could comb through it and find great players that we passed on. You know what I mean? But well, the way I'm looking at it right now, my thoughts are between Kevin King and Budda Baker. Not that I necessarily think we should have drafted those guys, but I think the fact that they went to the Packers, the Cardinals, two teams whose defenses and secondaries in particular tend to give us fits. I think we're going to regret those guys going to those two teams and having to deal with Kevin King playing with Clinton Dix. Those are two big, tough, mean defensive backs, and we've already seen what they've been able to do with guys like that against our team. So and I'm not saying we should have picked those guys so they wouldn't be in those other team hands. I just think the fact that it fell to those two teams in particular is interesting and unfortunate.
No,
sorry.
Okay.
I think the NFC West had a great draft. Like, other than the Rams, who I really don't know what they were doing really. Each got
They're hopeless.
Small school prospects, yeah, and they're still stuck with Jared Goff. And seem to think that Sean McVay can work miracles. So that'll be interesting to see. But I think the other two teams, I think the Cardinals got really good with Reddick and Baker. They can move those guys around, which is what they like to do in their defense, and blitz with them. I think it's going to cause us nightmares. And then the Niners are some way off still. But, Foster and Solomon Thomas, you're not going to be complaining with that. They had Foster ranked as their guy, I think, behind Thomas, and they managed to get him at 32. So they must have been delighted.
Well, they just fleeced the Bears too. That was ridiculous. What happened at the beginning of that draft?
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about that real quick because that brings up a really good point. So the first 4 quarterbacks taken, they were all teams traded up to select the quarterback. Is that correct?
Sounds right.
Trubinsky, the second pick. Watson someone moved up to take Watson.
Texans took Watson, and then Mahomes got taken by the
Kansas
Saints.
City.
Sorry, yeah.
Kansas City traded up.
Jumped ahead of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kansas
and
City. And then Kizzer, he was he selected by the Browns? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they traded up for that as well.
So the first 4 quarterbacks taken, they teams moved up from, and they gave up quite a bit of picks to get up there. I would say probably the Chiefs are probably the biggest surprise to see them move up. Not that they have to move on from Alex Smith right away, but I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah, it's weird. It seems like the NFL learned from reaching for mediocre or good offensive linemen, which has happened in years past. But still, the quarterback position is so important in the league that teams will trade up for the potential next guy.
Yeah, and once those quarterbacks were taken, those first 3 quarterbacks were taken, I was like, oh, well, there goes Seattle's shot to trade back, because who's going to trade up for any other position? Because the draft just didn't seem like it was going to check out that way. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on here to topic number 4, and this is really talking about John and Pete. So topic number 4, Pete and John are sticking to their beliefs with these drafted players, but will we see these guys help in 2017? We talked last week with the off season and also in the pre-draft that the Seahawks don't have a ton of glaring holes. They're not drafting to find key starters up and down the lineup, but they drafted 10 guys. They're already at 89 players. They're one player below the 90 player cap. Are these guys, and they also signed a bunch of undrafted free agents, are we going to see a lot of these guys help in 2017, or is it going to mostly be spot opportunities that these guys get? Matty, what's your take on that?
Well, I think an underrated factor is that a lot of them will be able to play special teams. I think they factor that into the draft process every year, especially as you get later into the picks. And the starters I envision are Posich at right tackle and McDowell, maybe not starting at 3 tech, but coming in on passing downs and causing havoc when he's got a small snap rate. And I think that's probably... Shaquille Griffin could play the opposite corner spot to Sherman, but we've seen how the Seahawks technique takes a while to learn, and I'm not sure if it'll be a day one starter there. They might put Lane out there, and I don't know who they'd put in the slot particularly. But yeah.
Is that something you find to be encouraging or discouraging?
I think it's discouraging. I think with the draft, the one complaint was they didn't draft enough corners. They only drafted Griffin. I know they're trying to convert Tyson out there, and they've even mentioned Hill with his movement skills. They might even try him at outside corner. But you would like to see a natural corner who knows the position and doesn't have to learn playing that outside corner position, and also learning the Seahawks technique, which we've seen takes a bit of time to learn. But then Elliott and Thorpe have had a year in the system, so you'd expect at least one of them to be at a better level. And Elliott particularly impressed me in the preseason, even if he looked a bit shell-shocked when he got regular season snaps.
I could see Malik McDowell getting into the rotation fairly early, and making a difference. I really, without knowing much about the guys, from what I've seen of Nasir Jones, I would not be surprised to see him get involved at some point, maybe later in the season. The one thing I like about both those guys in particular is just their size. They look like big, mean, nasty guys. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Jones get in there and make something happen. Probably maybe later in the year, just get into the rotation. And then, a lot of what I heard of Delano Hill was that we are looking to play him at corner. So I wouldn't expect him to have much impact during the season outside of special teams. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Shaquille Griffin get some meaningful playing time at some point. Maybe not as the number 2, but they'll get him out there and let him play a little bit, I would hope. But yeah, I don't... Go ahead.
Sorry, I think he can play inside, just on Griffin.
Yeah. Like as a slot corner, or... Yeah,
I think he could do that.
Okay,
If they wanted to get him on the field.
I wouldn't be surprised to see them, depending on how Shed is, I don't know how... I imagine he's healing up pretty well. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them want to stick with Lane at the slot, and then have, like you said, Elliott or Thorpe play number 2, and then eventually have Griffin take over at the number 2 at some point. But obviously that all remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a really Seahawks draft in some regards, where they're all solid picks. They all have feature opportunity. They all have places for people to kind of fill into. There's definitely a future for all of them on a position level, on opportunity level. But we don't know if that's going to be at the beginning of the year. And I think that's where you're kind of disappointed, because this is not a surefire thing. But you have to counter that with the fact that the Seahawks don't have a huge glaring hole at a lot of positions, so it's not like there's a spot that's just open for their taking. I agree with you, Matty and Zeb, that Posick probably is going to start on the right side somewhere, whether that's inside, which I've heard he's not necessarily do well just because of his height and maybe his leverage opportunities. But him at right tackle seems like a really promising thing. A lot of people online have talked about how we should all be very excited. I know Coleman has written about that from 3-Step Drop. I read his article and watched his video breaking down Posick and the really good things that he's done. He's probably the most surefire guy that's probably going to start closest to day one of the regular season than probably anyone else. But the opportunity for all of these guys to find playing time, it seems like their skill sets fit in so well with what Seahawks are looking for versatility-wise that it's a perfect example of what Pete and John are doing. Because they're not drafting for a 2010 Seahawks team. They're drafting for a 2017 veteran team that has very solidified positions. One thing that I want to ask you guys, and this is just opinion, the Seahawks have drafted the most linemen, 17, in the last, I think, 3, 4, or 5 drafts. None of their linemen have ever been signed to a second contract. The closest is going to be Justin Britt. The last lineman that they re-signed was Max Unger, and he was drafted before the Seahawks had John and Pete. What do you think that says about the Seahawks and their lineman attempts? Matty, I'm going to hit you.
I don't think you can. They've chosen not to re-sign guys who've been paid elsewhere, and if there'd been more continuation on the line, then you'd probably have seen better results. I don't think their draft picks have necessarily been bad. It's just every college lineman in the draft, bar a rare few, they need time to settle in the NFL and time to play together as a unit. And encouragingly, that seems to be what they're doing. They've spoke about keeping a young core together. I think they've been very aggressive this offseason. They tried to get TJ Lang, and they just missed out on him just because he wanted to live in his hometown. And they got Joe Cool, who's a league average left tackle, which is unfortunately for Fant, that's a big upgrade, really. I mean, Fant should come on leaps and bounds in his second year, but still, I don't think the Joe Cool signing can be understated. And then they've got Posic, they've got Ibushi. I think they've upgraded the line, and they've also still got that young core and they're talking up Odiambo now as a potential starter as well. So I think there's finally competition on the line, and I know every year people seem to say optimistic things about it, and then you see it in the preseason, or you hear camp stories about people getting blown back by a bull rush or speed off the edge killing a tackle. But I genuinely think this year it could actually be better. And even if it's an improvement from 32nd to, say, 25th in the NFL, that's huge considering how bad it was last year at times. Yeah,
that's a couple strong third down conversions that help you run out of the game or help you try and score a touchdown. So definitely has, that opportunity. Zeb, what about you? Real quick thoughts on the fact that they don't re-sign their linemen.
I don't know. It's hard to really figure out exactly what's going on there. Obviously, the offensive line has been continually disappointing throughout the last 3 or 4 seasons. Maybe longer. I don't know. It's obviously you don't want to think that we're just drafting bad guys, that we're bad at finding them. And then you also don't want to think that Cable's not doing a good enough job coaching them up. But it just, for whatever, it seems like every season it starts bad. By the end of the year, things seem to come together a little bit, and then it kind of just unravels again over the off season. And it's like we're starting fresh every year. So hopefully they're able to avoid that this season. And it would nice to. Is it Posic?
Posic is what I've read is the pronunciation. That's the most consistent one that I've seen.
Well, hopefully he comes in and helps. And Bradley Sowell's gone now, right?
Correct. He signed with another team. I can't remember who though.
Okay, and Gilliam's gone, so but for the most part, we should have most of the line back. Hopefully that'll help. And then, like we were talking about, Odiombo maybe being able to come in and start at somewhere on the line. So, yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic about it, but it's been an interesting few years when it comes to the offensive line. So I'm not necessarily holding my breath for it to get magically better.
Yeah, I think this is a conversation that Ross and I we talk about a lot when we message each other back and forth. And it's the idea that the Seahawks have a very specific idea of what they're willing to pay for a position, and it's kind of like a Moneyball aspect. And because these linemen, they're not that great to begin with, you don't really want to invest a whole lot of money because it's such a bad return on your investment, not only draft-wise, but monetarily. You look at all the linemen that they've lost, the only one that's gotten big money and actually has kept money is probably Russell Okung, and that's probably a shock more so than anyone else. He actually stayed healthy, which is something that he didn't have the greatest ability to do in Seattle. Not to say that he was always playing injured, but that was one of the knocks against him, and maybe why he wasn't.
Felt like he was always injured when he was here.
Yeah, but he got 2 basically monster contracts, which I think everyone was surprised. J.R. Sweezy, he got injured, so he hasn't had the best years. Max Singer got traded along for Jimmy Graham in a first rounder, and he's played pretty well in New Orleans. Brennan Giacomini, he's been cut. I think the Carpenter in New York Jets, he's doing all right, but he's not getting the biggest accolades for a free agent acquisition, which you don't need to get. So I do think it's interesting, but there's a reason for it. It goes into John and Pete's beliefs of what they're looking for on the offensive line, what Cable's looking for, and I think they're sticking to that. And for the most part, it's resulted in very up-down lines, but at the end of the year, they're still in the playoffs. They're still being competitive, and I think as a fan, that's what you would prefer to see rather than always trying to hit these kind of home run plays and hope for the best.
Yeah, there's a salary cap for a reason, and they have to pick an area where you need to save money. If you end up paying everyone sort of average contracts to fit under the cap, you're going to end up with a pretty average to bad football team.
True.
Or you're going to be like a terrible team, like the Niners or the Browns, invest money in the wrong people, cut them after a year or two, and then you're going to have either dead space or a ton of cap space. And either one is a terrible position to be in.
Damn right.
All right. So we're going to chug along. We've got our fan topics, and we also got a couple of predictions. So we did get a question, and this is actually a question for Matty. So Trumbella16, CJ Trumbella, who Matty is going to be working with on future podcasts on the 3-Step Drop, so congratulations to Matty. He asked, does Matt like American food or European food better? Do you consider European food to be UK food? I don't know if there's a difference for you guys.
Well, if you look at American food, you'd have to say that a lot of it is naturally influenced by European food, say pizza or hamburger, which would originate from Hamburg in Germany. But, barbecue's pretty good, and that originates from America, right? And fried chicken. Yeah. Pretty good. So, it's a tough one. I'm going to go with European, though.
All right.
I always say to Americans about English food and English cuisine, and they're not really that keen on it. So we have something called fish and chips, which for you would be fish and fries, which is fish in batter with like chunky fries. And everyone seems to think that's gross, but
we still call it chips, though.
Yeah, we call it chips out here, at least in Seattle.
Homage, I think.
I guess it's a chunkier thing than a fry, right? Because a fry's a bit skinny, right?
Well, no, when we have fish and chips here as exactly, it's French fries, but when we have it with chips, British style, we call it chips.
I went to Ivor's in Seattle, and that was, it was right.
when you come to Seattle, I'm going to take you to my favorite place, which is Spuds. My wife's family, she loves Ivors, but my family, we're a Spuds kind of family, which totally different fish. Fries are about the same, but it's really the fish. And when you come to town, we'll check it out. Zeb, you can join us too.
Great.
Last question for Matty. Are the girls cuter over there? I'm assuming he means in the UK.
Well, I currently am lucky enough to have a girlfriend, so I'd say she is definitely cuter. But obviously, I can't comment on any of the other girls. So
there you go. Well spoken.
I will say that my only time in the UK was spent at Heathrow, and there wasn't much eye candy walking around there.
No, yeah, I can imagine. But you've been to Italy, right?
Yes, and that was definitely a whole different story.
Yeah, I can't comment.
All right, so we're going to do a couple questions for predictions. So first question. NFC record after the draft. How are this? What win range do you put the Seahawks and the rest of the teams in the NFC?
So the under/over for the Seahawks is 10.5, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'd probably say, looking at the schedule, I'd say 12-4, maybe 11-5. I don't know. And then the Cardinals, 10-6, maybe.
I saw them at a 7.5 for the over/under. So you're going 2.5 over.
No, I think 9. I think 9-7, 10-6. It depends if Palmer can maintain his health, but I think the defensive acquisitions they've made are a big boost to them, and they also got some nice value on the offensive line later in the draft. So yeah,
I think we're looking at 11 plus wins for the Hawks this year, and like basically the same thing as Matty. I think the Cardinals are going to be 2 games back or so. I see the Niners improving, maybe not dramatically, but they could probably get 6 or 7 wins if things come together for them. And I don't know how many Rams wins there were last year, but I'm thinking they'll be probably around the bottom of the conference.
Yeah,
winless.
I'm definitely in line with you guys. Where Seahawks are going to win double digits. I'll roughly say they're 10-6 now because I don't know how good the line is going to be. Don't know how the secondary is going to be yet. I'm optimistic, but at the beginning of the year, might be a little questionable. The Cardinals, they drafted key guys, but they still have the same problems. Their quarterback's super old, very brittle. They can only go as far as Carson Palmer's healthy, and I don't think he'll be healthy. I think they're going to be like a 7-win team. Niners and Rams, they're a rebuild project. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a defense. They don't have a line. They don't have a running game. The Rams have a solid defensive line, but that's only going to take them so far. They'll be lucky to be combined for 7 wins together. So I'm not very optimistic for the rest of the teams in the NFC West.
Rams will still beat us.
Yeah, that'll be their 2 wins for the year.
Wade Phillips is not a great combination for the Seahawks, is it?
No, it's not going to be a good matchup, but...
No.
All right. So, looking at things right now with 89 players on the roster, who won't be on the roster in the fall? If you could pick one offensive and one defensive person.
They don't have to be starters, right?
Don't have to be starters, just anybody. Yeah.
I'll say Kevin Pierre-Louis will be gone, and I don't know who on offense. Tanner McAvoy.
Oh no. Tanner. Yeah, I'm not gonna do Tanner like that. I like Tanner. I think it was
I like him too.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a nasty question. How about you? Let me think about it. How about you, Sammy?
All right, I'm gonna say on the defensive side, someone that's not gonna make the team. Let's see. Ooh, that's tough. It's probably going to be someone that's on the cusp. Kevin Pierre-Louis is pretty good. I think it's one of the linebackers that they signed. I'm going to say one of the random linebackers that they signed. I really don't know.
Dewey McDonald.
No, McDonald's is the... Oh, no, that is one of the random linebackers. I'm going to go with Dewey McDonald.
Ronald Powell. I don't even know who those guys are.
No, Dewey McDonald. We're going to go with him. He's a linebacker. We have too many already. We're only going to play two of them. Yeah, but I think the guy that they got from San Francisco is going to play a little bit more.
Yeah.
On the offensive side, I think it's going to be Alex Collins. Alex Collins probably is not going to be able to withstand this latest round. He's a middle draft pick, but unless he comes into camp super fit, super hungry, super in shape, I just don't know if there are enough touches, and I don't know if he warrants a roster spot over guys that are younger, maybe a little bit better.
Do we still have Pope?
We did sign him, so he's one of the 89.
We picked up that Carson.
Yeah, Brandon Carson. He's the H-back, fullback, tight end combo kind of guy. Yeah.
I know. I meant Christopher Carson.
The draft pick. The draft pick.
He runs a bit like Marshall, other than he goes down a bit like Turbin with ankle tackles. So, But yeah, two players I'd cut. Yeah. 2 players I think will get cut.
Yeah.
I think maybe. So not doing a really easy one to call. Maybe Joey Hunt, because.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, 6th rounder, undersized. We've got Pochich covering if Britt goes down. Yeah. Please let that not happen. But anyway,
he was a rookie last year, but he looked terrible against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I think to be an undersized centre, you have to get a lot of things going your way, and I don't think he has it.
And he can't rock that haircut.
Fortunately. Yeah. And then defense, maybe who's that safety? The French sounding safety. Is it Pierre Desir? Pierre Desir? Him.
I don't even know who that guy is. He
just bounced around the practice squad a lot, and I think they'll probably try him at corner, and they'll probably try him at safety as well. I think he's 6'2".
Way to go out on a limb.
Yeah.
I'm going with with Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner.
Good picks. Very likely.
Gone.
All right, last prediction, and this will be open to any rookie. Who will be the best fantasy rookie in the NFL next year?
Any rookie?
Any rookie.
Shit. How do you even?
All right, I'm going to say my guy because you guys. I don't want you to steal my thunder. John Ross is going to be the rookie of the year next year.
Okay, that's fair. Disagree, but that's fair. I think it's going to be somebody that we don't expect. I think it's going to be a later round pick that nobody's really looking at right now, and I don't know who that is.
Darbo.
Darbo. I mean, if we're talking about Seahawks draft picks, he has the potential to be the one guy that shines in fantasy.
He's like the only candidate. I'd say Leonard Fournette, because they'll probably hand the ball off to him.
Yeah, Fournette might get like 42 touchdowns.
And then he'll be broken in like a year and a half.
And they drafted probably. They drafted a huge fullback for him, and they got another fullback in free agency. And I think they're just going to say, well, we've got Blake Bortles, so we'll just have him ball off 40, 50 times a game. And they'll probably make the scrape into the playoffs.
Yep.
And then, then he'll get. That's, I think, how he'd get Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think if they didn't make the playoffs, he wouldn't get it.
I think Mike Williams, in the artist formerly known as the San Diego Chargers, has potential to put up some big numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Corey Davis.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's our post-draft episode. Shoutouts. Matty, shoutouts for you.
I'm excited to be joining the 3-Step Drop podcast. So shout out to those guys, Coleman and Leor and CJ. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And buy the Inside the Pylon draft guide if you haven't already, with all the scouting reports. And it's got a few Seahawks players in there, which is very detailed. Yeah.
Right. Zeb, shoutouts.
Go to triplebpodcast.com and listen to me and my idiot friends talk about, well, all sorts of anything and everything, but mostly about pizza and cheeseburgers. And then go to theidiotsreview.com to get our more formal takes on some of the places around town that we decide to visit.
Nice. I'd like to thank Matty for joining us. He has been a very wonderful special guest. He's been really courteous with his time. Thank you so much for joining us. You've been a pleasure to have. We definitely want to welcome you back. We want to keep you involved. Zeb, Ross, you guys rock. Apologies because Ross had to cut out due to some connection issues. But I also want to make a special announcement. Zeb and I and Ross, we actually have launched our own website. It's called hawkscast.com. If you have a chance, come check it out. It's a new website where we're going to have our podcast. We're going to have other material that's going to be online. Check it out. Please reach out to us. Give us feedback. We want to know more. We want to build a community for Seahawk fans, like people like this podcast, like the 3-Step Drop, and other people that we communicate. This is the Seahawks FanTable Streamcast. Thank you very much for joining us. Go Hawks!
Go Hawks!